Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm bringing you a mid-month wrap-up. Now this isn't something that I normally do. I normally leave all of my mini book reviews until the end of the month and talk to you about everything that I've read throughout the course of the month, but I am just about to move house. I am just about to move from Dublin back to London. In fact, I am moving in mere hours. And I'm not going to be taking any of the books that I've read so far this month with me, so I thought I would review them for you now. I have 6 books to talk to you about, so I'm just going to get straight into it and I'm going to talk about these in the order that I read them. So starting with Snowflake by Louise Nealon. You may remember this book from my recent 5-star predictions video. I could not resist reading it and I really loved this book. This is about an 18-year-old girl who is grappling with becoming an adult. She grew up in a rural area, her family has a dairy farm, and she is commuting into Dublin, into Trinity College, and that is quite a culture shock for her. She's getting used to being in that new environment and meeting new people. A lot of the book has to do with her relationship with her body and relationships with sex. I thought the book took a really nuanced and intimate look at how intense female friendships can often be. I also found this character's home life fascinating and the strained relationships that she has with her mother and her uncle. I think her whole family has a lot of mental health issues and they have a lot of difficulties that come from repressing their problems and not speaking about their problems openly. I think the book is full of really detailed observations about human behavior, and that is something that I love in novels. And I love novels that have complicated, flawed young female characters. For every moment of intense sadness that there is in this book, there is a moment of lightness and something to find humor in, and I think it just completely captures that transition into adulthood and how difficult that can often be, how difficult it can often be to come to understand yourself as a person at that very young age and dealing with very grown-up things when you have so recently been a child. I thought this book was really fantastic. I thought it was so impressive for a debut. And yeah, I completely loved it. This month I have also read Slingshot by Mercedes Helvine. Oh, I didn't care for this book. This is a young adult book that deals with a lot of the intense feelings that you experience as an adolescent around friendships and romantic relationships and sex. And something that I really did appreciate about this book was that I think it depicted teenagers in a way that wasn't sugar-coated or palatable. I think particularly in regards to how this novel deals with sex, it felt really genuine to how teenagers react to those kinds of things and talk about those kinds of things, the kind of worries that they have around it, but also the simultaneous interest and excitement. And while this is a complicated and slightly messy love story between our main character Grace and her love interest Wade, it is mostly just Grace being insufferable for the entire novel. And I really don't mind an unlikable main character. I think that people are flawed. I would find it weird if there were no unlikable aspects to a main character. However, Grace is just relentlessly a dick. She's horrible to Wade. She is horrible to anyone who is nice to her. She is horrible to her biology teacher who is nothing but supportive for her. She's horrible to him because she's got a crush on him. And it's like she feels entitled that he reciprocate her feelings, and she's also horrible to his fiance. And in many ways that could probably be true to life. You know, teenagers can be horrible. Teenage emotions can be very intense. Feelings can be very confusing. But it just felt like there was no respite from her being consistently annoying. I do think the novel really captured the agony and the ecstasy and the intensity of experiencing so many different feelings for the first time and how baffling they can be to grapple with for the first time. So maybe I just wasn't the right reader for this. You know, I'm not the target audience for it. I do read a lot of YA and enjoy a lot of YA, but this one wasn't really a fan, unfortunately. However, a book that I did absolutely love was A Checkmate by Mallory Blackman. This is the 3rd book in the Noughts and Crosses series, a series that I have been gradually reading over the past few years. I'm sure you know all about this series already. It is very famous. I am coming to it very late. But in the 1st book in this series, Noughts and Crosses, we are following the romance between Callum and Seffi, who grow up in a society where the power dynamics in race are completely reversed. So society is split into knots, who are white people, and crosses, who are black people, and it is black people who have the structural power. So there is a lot of overt racism, but also culturally ingrained racism towards the knots, who are white people. By the time we get to the 3rd book in the series, we have moved on a generation, although there are definitely characters still knocking around from the first book. Each of the books in this series are phenomenally written. They are so powerful. Not only is that kind of structural role reversal a really fascinating lens to explore race and power dynamics and prejudice, the novels are also often just really page-turning and really thrilling, and have characters that you really care about. Even if you don't fully support what they're doing, or you completely don't support what they're doing, you are very invested in them as people. This book in particular has a lot to do with how young people can be radicalized, and as with the previous books in the series that I read, this was an instant 5 stars for me. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Cannot wait to read the 4th book and the 5th book in the series. Next, I read Bridge of Clay by Marcus Zuzak, and actually, can we talk about how I read 2 chunky books this month, because I am very proud of myself. However, this book is a bit boring. So I was really excited to read this book because I absolutely loved The Book Thief when I read it, although I think I probably read it about 10 years ago now. God, is that right? I feel so old. This book is very different from The Book Thief. There are 2 things that I think it shares in common with The Book Thief. The first being that it has a narration that is not the obvious place to tell the story from. This book isn't narrated by the main character. And there's also a real delicacy to the writing. I think Marcus Zuzak is an incredible writer, like on a line-by-line level. However, what I didn't enjoy about this book wasn't on a line-by-line level, it was the overall plot, because it was boring. It is a novel that is about 5 brothers kind of bringing themselves up. It's a book that has a lot to do with that kind of brotherly masculine relationship and how that functions, and in fact can often be very dysfunctional. It deals very intimately with the experiences of male childhood specifically and male adolescence. It's a book that's about boys. Maybe that's why I couldn't get into it, I don't know. It's a book about forgiveness and redemption and wanting to do something significant and memorable. It's a book that is about how we process and move on from intense grief. It's an extremely slow moving book, and I think that is one of the reasons I perhaps didn't get on with it so much. Like, it was a plot that I wasn't really invested in, and it was a plot that was moving very slowly. It feels like nothing will happen, and then in the space of one line, something really significant will happen, and it's kind of like blink and you miss it. I think all of those things combined with the length of this book just really wasn't for me. I do think there is so much merit to this. As I said, I think on a line by line level it is written really fantastically, and perhaps if you are someone who has, you know, feelings about those very delicate, powerful sibling relationships, particularly the relationships between brothers, then you would perhaps get much more out of the emotional aspects of this book than I did. But I did find myself thinking, God, when is this going to end? And that is not something you want with a chunky book. It was a struggle to get to the end, I'm not gonna lie. I also read Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, and this was the first Daphne du Maurier book that I'd ever read. It definitely wasn't a new favourite for me, but I would be really intrigued to read some more of her books after reading this one. This is about a young woman named Mary whose father died when she was very young, and when we meet Mary, her mother has fallen ill. Her mother knows that she is going to die, and she instructs Mary to write to her sister, so Mary's aunt, to let her know about the situation and ask if Mary can come and live with her. Mary finds out that her aunt has now married a man named Joss, and they run an inn, which is the Jamaica Inn of the book's title. And when Mary arrives to stay with her aunt, things immediately feel very sinister. Her husband is a horrible man who has a terrible reputation in the wider community. People don't want to go to Jamaica Inn. Like, you just know that there's something bad going on there that people don't want to specify what it is. They just don't want to go there. And the author has done this amazing job of crafting this really spooky, unsettling atmosphere where I think for much of the book I wasn't sure if there was kind of like supernatural elements to it. Like, it's got that level of mystery and spookiness to it, and I think that's the thing that really stands out to me about this book, was that kind of atmosphere. In terms of the actual plot, I wasn't blown away by it. I wasn't blown away by finding out exactly what is going on. I'm not sure if the ending is meant to be a surprise, but I didn't really have any kind of strong reaction to it. I was underwhelmed. But it is that writing and that atmosphere that really stood out to me about this book. So I think when I eventually get around to reading Rebecca, because I think that's something that the plot of that would probably interest me a lot more, I think I could really love Rebecca. So yes, not a new favourite, but I'm intrigued. And the final book I'm going to talk to you about is Wine Girl by Victoria James. Now, this was a bit of a weird read for me, so I don't know how to say this word, and I know I could Google it, but I'm not gonna. Victoria is one of the, if not the youngest person in her profession. She is a sommelier. I think that's how you say it. She is, as the title suggests, a wine girl. She's a wine expert. I don't know anything about wine. I have no interest in wine. I'm not really interested in like fine dining restaurant experiences either, so I really wasn't sure if this was going to be a book for me. But in many ways, the wine thing is kind of secondary to a lot of other stuff that's going on. This is Victoria's memoir of her very difficult childhood and adolescence, where she just had a really bad time. Like, this feels like Victoria has lived a life where just a lot of bad things have happened to and around her. Really, really awful things. And it's about how she rises from that, how she makes a tremendous success of her life. It also looks at the judgment that she faces being a young woman in her profession. So they're all things that really interested me. And I think actually this is really comparable to Educated by Tara Westover, because like that book, you know, it looks at a young woman who had a very difficult upbringing, building something from that and striving and getting the life that she wants, while still carrying the trauma of their upbringing. But weirdly, I feel like this book has been written too soon. I feel like it lacked a sense of perspective and being able to properly reflect. It's really difficult to say this about someone's life story, but I don't think she has given herself the space to properly come to terms with a lot of the things that have happened to her and look at them in a slightly more objective way, in a more reflective kind of nuanced way. I feel like that is a really horrible thing to say about someone's life. So yeah, a bit of an odd one really. I don't really know how I would rate this, but I do think Victoria is really interesting as a person, and I'm always going to appreciate reading stories, whether fiction or memoir, that are about young women succeeding. Like, I love things like that. So if that sounds intriguing to you, then maybe you would like this one as well. So that is it. That is everything that I have read so far this month. All of the books that I've mentioned will be linked down below in the description. If you have any thoughts on anything that I've mentioned in this video, do leave me a comment down below, or leave me the grapes emoji so I know that you're here. I forgot to do my TBR. Okay, so my TBR currently stands at this number. Clap, clap, clap. Well done me. I will see you in a few days for a book haul.